This is Doraemon, an advanced neural network used for machine translation running on modern MT technology. Even its supply is advanced as it fully runs on solar energy made by solar panels on top of our office. Hello, good afternoon, at least it's afternoon here. My name is Loek van Kalten. First name is Loek, and that also explains the name of the small company I run called Loekalization, which is specializing in localization, to be even more specific, the localization of games from Japanese, Chinese, and English to Dutch. We also do other language pairs, for example, translations to Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. But this is not something I do personally. This is basically what I do as a project manager, and that falls outside the scope of this video. In this video, I would like to talk about the translations I do myself and the tools I use to do that. And the main tool I use for localizing games, in this case from English to Dutch, is a tool called Doraemon, which is a tool I developed myself after not being satisfied with the existing tools on the market. The tool is called Doraemon. Doraemon is a robot cat you often find in Japanese anime and manga. He's pretty famous in Japan. And since he's a robot and a cat, I thought he would be the perfect mascot for our own little project, which is basically a cat tool that is catering to all my wishes, wants, wishes, and desires. So, without further ado, let's explain what I'm currently working on. I'm currently working on a project for a client called EDS Wordlands, and they're a great client. I've been working with the owner of this agency for about 20 years already, also when she was still working at other localization companies. And she is a very experienced localizer, and she has many connections in the industry. And she has asked me to localize a game called Grifflands from English to Dutch. So, and the game, as said, called Grifflands, released by Client Entertainment, is really a great game, which is a bit similar to I guess, Magic the Gathering. It's a battle card game. You build decks with cards, you follow the storyline, and you try to make your deck stronger so that you are able to face even stronger enemies, play the missions, play the story, play the quests, and eventually end the game. It's a really interesting game. As you can see, the art style is really fascinating, and there's also lots of puns, humor, and even some fictional language, which makes it pretty challenging to translate it from English to Dutch. So far, the support from the client has been absolutely terrific. They're answering all the hundreds of questions the translators working on this project are asking. So it's really a nice project to demonstrate, and I also got specific permission to demonstrate the localization of this game from English to Dutch. So without further ado, let's pause this video and move to the actual tool I would like to show you. The tool is organized in this folder, projects EDS Wordland Grifflands, and we're currently working on batch 2 of this project, which we started on 7 April. It consists of 200,000 words. And what I do is, this is the main menu of my tool. It looks pretty boring, I admit it, but it's just for my own purposes. It doesn't need a shiny interface as it's not on the market yet, at least. I can put the working folder here. I can choose how many items I want to display per page. An item in this case is a translation segment, and well, the more segments you tend to display on a page, the slower the browser, because it's all browser based, tends to become. And 250 is a nice compromise. It gives me enough overview of the strings before and after the string I'm currently working on, and at the same time it doesn't slow down the browser too much. Here I can choose the different language pairs. Well, today we're working on an English-Dutch translation, and here's some other stuff I can set. I can just basically choose to export translations I've already done. I can choose to export the entire database for example, training purposes of the neural network I'm using. And here is some other stuff I can do, which I may or may not explain later. Most of the stuff here is self-explanatory, and there's some other stuff which I specifically use for the language school, which I run as a side business. It's a Japanese language school, but that is not something we will dive into today. So without further ado, let's just dive into the translation. I click the translate button, and this is the main interface of Doraemon. Here on top we see the current working directory. There's an export button to export the translation I'm currently working on, and there's some other stuff. For example, auto propagation is turned on. Translations. This button actually I no longer need. It's no longer actually used because I now have. It used to be that translations were exported on the fly, sentence by sentence, but there's no actual need for that. So it was basically slowing down the tool unnecessarily. It was a feature that I could turn on and off, but instead I implemented to this button so that when I'm finished for the batch of today, I can just export it all at once. So that means that I don't need this functionality anymore. As you can see, this tool is still very much in development. In fact, I've opened a PHP Storm, which is my coding tool, in the background so that I can actually change the code on the fly. There are tens of thousands of lines of code by now. It's become a pretty complicated tool already. So yeah, I could just, choose to delete this functionality, but that's not something I will do in this video because it would take too long. It's just not a matter of, I could just, make this button disappear, but there's more to that. There's functionality that's linked to this button that we would also need to remove. So let's not do that. Add means that translations I'm currently doing are actually added to the translation memory, which is something we mostly want. We mostly want to add translations to the memory, but in some rare cases I may choose not to add them because what I'm working on is really a draft translation for myself, bit messy, not being proofread. So yeah, something I would use for my own purposes, but not something that I would actually want to put in the memory for future translations. No check is a feature only used for translations from. What was it? I think that was from English to Japanese. We're not doing that today, so it's not add. And these are two. So this is some debug functionality, which we may or may not dive into later. And this is the actual language combination I'm currently working on, English to Dutch. Okay. So, what makes Doraemon special? Because there are so many cat tools on the market. What makes Doraemon really special? Well, it makes it special because it's based on local adaptive machine translation. Basically, it tries to combine the best of both worlds. On the one hand, there is this database here, which you can see here, and then it contains all translations I've done until now. Well, I started using this tool since last year, September or so, and by now there are 370,367 English-Dutch segments in the memory. This is just an old-fashioned translation memory, as you can find it in basically any cat tool. But there's more to that. There is also a neural network. When Doraemon scans the database and it cannot find a match that is good enough, then it will basically ask Doraemon the computer, which is basically the computer there with the purple pink screen you see behind me. It will ask this computer to come up with a neural translation. This is the screen of the neural network, the computer behind me. You can see it up close here. It's not very exciting to see. It basically just says, listen, there are two neural engines running at the moment, English Dutch and Japanese Dutch. These are engines trained based on my own translation memories only. There's no stuff in it from the European Union or stuff you can find on the internet. This is my style, my Dutch, my translations turned into a neural network that is being used to offer neural suggestions. There's a lot going on under the hood, but that's not something you can see here. And by the way, as you can see, this is not Windows. This neural network is running, like most neural networks actually, on Linux, Unix, Ubuntu 18 to be precise. So let's just close this again. Back to the Windows system, the client, which I'm currently working on. So basically what Doraemon does is it scans the memory, looks for a match from the translation memory, and if it says, well, this is not good enough, then it asks the neural network to come up with a possibly better suggestion. And all cat tools in the world basically can already do this. But the difference is that the neural network Doraemon is based on, it's based on a neural network called Modern MT, which is product from the European Union. And what makes this neural network different is the fact that it is adaptive. What does that mean? Well, most neural networks need to be trained, and this takes about, well, in my case, 8 to 12 hours for 25 million words, which is the total number of words in my database currently. But the thing is that once a neural network has been trained, things have been pretty much written in stone. And so the neural network does not learn from new translations you are doing at that moment. And the beautiful thing about Modern MT, the framework Doraemon is based on, is the fact that the neural network is actually, even after it has been trained, it still learns from new translations I'm feeding it. And that makes it adaptive. And as far as I know, Modern MT is the only tool in the world that can do that. Doraemon is also special because everything is done locally, meaning that no translations are sent or received to and from the cloud, which is great because, you know, game clients tend to be pretty scary about early reveals of their game. It's all confidential information. So they don't like being their information, their game strings being published in the cloud. So what I'm offering them is a safe environment, heavily secured, to make sure that no one will find out about their games until the game developers themselves decide people should find about their games. And I said I've got explicit permission from this client to talk you through this project at this moment, because the game is currently in beta testing already. Okay, so what do we have? Lots of information here, mainly used for debugging purposes. What's interesting is the last translated segment. That brings me to the segment I'm currently working on straight at once. This is the first segment we're going to do now. What you see is that one translation segment in this game, and many games actually, does not consist of one sentence, greatly reducing the number of possible matches you will get from your translation memory. I think most of you are very aware of this issue. Because what we have here, it is just one segment, and if you try to match it with the actual translation memory, you will see that it's very hard to get a match that is even remotely similar. This seems to be some kind of update or variation on an existing string, because 67% is actually still not too bad for a match of this length. But yeah, basically this is unusual because we have to rewrite so many parts. And this is where some extra functionality in Doraemon steps in, because one of the features Doraemon has, which other cat tools do not have, is what I call patched matches. And what does that mean? Well, first, of course, it tries to look up the entire segment in this translation memory, the database. And it comes up, the best match it finds is a 67% match, which is not that good, really. So what it does try after that, when it decides, okay, well, this is not good enough for me, let's see if it can get something better, is it will try to look up all different sentences in these segments one by one. So it looks up "spare me the lecture, laborer," and then it looks up "I know your movement and I can't say I care for your methods," and then it looks up "our methods," etc., etc. So it looks up the entire segment. That's one lookup. Then it looks up "spare me the lecture," "I know your movement," "our methods," "we're just turning," "if you read this, why don't you," "all I ask," and "it barely covers," which is 8 sentences plus the entire segment. So it basically does 9 lookups in the database. And if it finds a partial match or a full match, it will just insert this into the suggested translation, And those parts that have been inserted this way are purple. So as you can see, for example, our methods, it has found that subsegment in probably this string. What it does is it looks up, it finds our methods, and it has found it not in this, but in this segment. And it sees that in this segment, it is the second sentence of this segment. And then what it does is, well, if it's the second sentence in this segment, it's probably also the second sentence in the matching target segment. And the matching target segment is here. And I don't much like what I've seen of your methods has been translated as ik houd dit voor jullie methode. And then our methods has been translating as onze methode. And says, well, if our methods is the second sentence in the source segment, it's probably also the second segment in the target segment. And then it comes up with onze methode as a translation, and that has been inserted here as a patched match. That's pretty complicated, and of course this only works if the segmentation used in the source and target segments is exactly the same. If the source segment contains 7 sentences, whereas the target segment contains 8 sentences, obviously the sentences will be out of sync and things will go wrong. So it does work, but it does not always work, which is why a human check afterwards is always necessary. But onze methode is obviously the correct translation for our method, so we can just leave this as is. MemoQ has similar functionality called LSC, lookup segments concordance or something like. I'm not sure about the exact meaning of that abbreviation, but I've never got that to work. It was never useful to me. I don't think it does what it's supposed to do. On the contrary, and I've basically just turned it off because it's also incredibly slow. So, I think, I dare say there is no other cat tool that is capable of doing this in a more or less reliable way. It has found more patched sentences. For example, here, this one, why don't you take one for yourself, which is part of this segment, and it is it's basically the same segment as it has found before. So the explanation for this part is basically the same. It's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh sentence in this segment. So it probably belongs to the seventh sentence in the target segment, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is indeed, waarom neem je er niet één mee voor jezelf? Which is indeed the translation for why don't you take one for yourself? And that has been inserted as a patched match. Waarom neem je er niet één mee voor jezelf? Etc, etc. The same story applies to everything that shows up in purple below the actual segment I'm working on. So let's just translate it. Spare me the lecture, laborer. I know you're. Spare me the lecture. This is not a correct translation. This part of the translation, it did not find a partial or a full match in the translation memory. So this sentence was then sent to the actual neural network behind me, and yeah, so to come up with a neural machine translated suggestion. And this is not a very a good suggestion, I'm afraid. It says, spare me the material, laborer. That's not what we want. We want lecture. So, bespaar me je preek. Spare me the sermon, that's what it means. Bespaar me je preek, arbeider. I know your movement and I can say I care for your methods. Ik ken je beweging en ik kan niet zeggen dat ik ook maar iets om jouw methode geef. That sounds good. Onze methode, that was the partial match, the patch match. We're just turning the system back in on itself. We draaien het systeem gewoon weer terug. That's a neural suggestion. Not a very good one. Not a very good way to start this video, to be honest. We're just turning the system back in on itself. This is because this sentence is highly pneumatic. So we gebruiken het systeem gewoon alleen maar tegen zichzelf. I'm not sure whether this is a good translation. Let's try some concordance. No, nothing I can find. So, yeah, well, what to do. We gebruiken het systeem alleen maar tegen zichzelf. Let me think for just a bit, okay? Let me just think for a bit. So, yes, after taking a few sips of my cappuccino, which is basically the gasoline I run on, I think I found a good free translation. So instead of translating this literally, we gebruiken het systeem alleen maar tegen zichzelf, which doesn't sound right in Dutch. I'm gonna rephrase this as follows. We zorgen er alleen maar voor dat het systeem zich tegen zichzelf keert. And that sounds a lot more natural in Dutch. Okay, if you read this manifesto, I'm sure you'll understand what we mean. By the way, as you can see, while I was editing this translation, some new lines appeared under the segment I'm working on, one in gray and one in orange. This is actually the original segment, the segment the Doraemon basically came up with, and below that you will find the current translation, which is, in which you can see all the changes I made. This is actually a new feature I added a few days ago. It's still not finished, as you can see. It's still very much in development, but I'm intending to change the display of this into something that looks more like what you see above here, so that you can easily see the differences. This is actually pretty easy to implement, so maybe it's something I will do tonight or tomorrow. As for now, this is the way it's displayed. So yeah, it's pretty hard to see what I've actually changed, but okay. Then, the next sentence. If you read this manifesto, I'm sure you'll understand what I mean. Als je dit manifest leest, weet ik zeker dat je begrijpt wat we bedoelen. This is actually a pretty good suggestion from the neural network behind me. So this saves me a lot of time. I just take away one letter and I'm done. Why don't you take one for yourself? Waarom neem je er niet één mee voor jezelf? That's actually good. And it's, of course it's good because it's patched, you know. This was found in the existing translation memory in a completely different segment. It started counting segments, sentences in the source segment and the target segment, and as explained before, and it came up with this suggestion, which is perfect. Het enige wat ik vraag, all I ask is a small donation, is een kleine donatie. That's correct. It's nauwelijks genoeg om de drukkosten te dekken. This was all patched, so I can just leave this as is. So let me just give this whole string just one more check. Bespaar me je preekarbeider. Ik ken je beweging. Kan ik zeggen dat ik ook maar iets om jullie methode geef. Onze methode, we zorgen er alleen maar voor dat het systeem zich tegen zichzelf keert. Als je dit manifest leest, weet ik zeker dat je begrijpt wat we bedoelen. Waarom neem je er niet een mee voor jezelf? Het enige wat ik vraag is een kleine donatie. Het is nauwelijks genoeg om de drukkosten te dekken. Instead of er niet één mee, waarom neem je er... It's okay, I guess. So, I mean, this is just a draft translation, and I will still proofread it twice, actually, at least, so I can still make changes, you know? So I'm just going to add this as a preliminary translation to the translation memory. So I just control down, and we go to the next segment. It's thinking, because this too is a very long segment, and as I said, contrary to many CAD tools, it doesn't do just one lookup. It will look up each and every sentence in the whole segment, to see whether it can come up with patch matches. Well, as you can see, the match it found for the entire segment is only 42%, which basically means unusable, and also it has only found one partial segment. The rise, it has found the rise in the existing segment. What is the rise? And it then comes up with the patch translation. Wat is de verrijzing? As you can see, this is not a full match. It's only fuzzy. It's only partial, I'd say. So I need to get rid of what is. So this becomes de verrijzing. And as I've now edited the translation, you immediately see the edited segment appear below. Okay, well, this is a very manual segment I have to translate, and as it's not very interesting for you to see me think and go and and oh, what shall I do? Shall I do this or shall I do that? Let's just skip this part of the video, and I'll be back in the next in a few minutes when I've actually translated this whole segment. So see you very soon. Okay, so after a few minutes, I'm finally done with this segment, which is basically one big neural match from the translation from the neural network behind me. Speaking about that, actually, when I'm requesting, when Doraemon requests neural feedback, neural translations, it does not request the segment as a whole. In that case, too, it feeds the segment sentence by sentence, and that also improves the quality of the suggestions the neural network comes up with. So there's a pun here, actually. There is this workers' rights movement in the game called The Rise. And the main character here asks, is that a motivational group or a baking technique, perhaps? And it's great because we can preserve this pun in Dutch. De verrijzing is dat I've decided to translate motivational group as zelfhulpgroep, self-help group. I like that. I like the sound of that in Dutch. Motivational group doesn't really feel right in Dutch. Of misschien een baktechniek. Een zelfhulpgroep, zeker. We zijn een arbeidersbeweging. Heb je gehoord van... And here I was doubting a bit. I was not sure about a good translation of insurrection. So I just selected the word and then pressed Ctrl-L for concordance. There are actually two concordance features in Doraemon. One is Concordance All and one is called Concordance Franchise. Mostly I first try the concordance of this particular franchise, and if I don't see any useful suggestions, then I can press Ctrl-K to get more suggestions from all clients, all translations I've done until now. When I press this, here it shows a concordance match. We're a liberation organization that has roots in the Bradfield's insurrection, and here insurrection has been translated as oproer. I didn't really like the sound of that. Oproer is a pretty formal word. It has an article head, which doesn't really sound right in this sentence. So instead, I've decided to go for another word in the end. Giving me now two possible translations of the word insurrection, namely oproer en opstand. Broodvelden, breadfields, is actually defined as a term. Here above, you see all terms that occur in this sentence, and I can actually add and delete terms on the fly. Breadfields should always be translated as broodvelden, it says, and that has been done. Now, if I, for example, make a mistake, for example, I put a space in between brood and velden, which is grammatically wrong in Dutch, but that's a different story. It will now recheck the match, and in this case, this really takes a long time because I shifted my cursor to other places in the interface. But yeah, once it finally finished, it will now show the same term in orange, meaning indicating a problem. Basically, this is live quality assurance, which is something I haven't really found in other CAT tools yet either. Most CAT tools quality assurance is a button you press when you're done with the translation and you just check the whole translation at once. I prefer having live quality assurance. I want to be corrected on the spot by my tools, and that's basically what happens here. So when I would now try to control down this segment to add it to the memory, that would not work. I'm not. This functionality is currently blocked because first I need to solve this problem. Now I can of course choose to ignore this. I may have a very specific reason to specifically not adhere to the terminology displayed above. If I want to ignore this, I could just click this ignore button, and now it shows up in green saying, okay, listen, the terminology in your translation does not adhere to the terminology in this list. So I'm just warning you, but it's okay. You may go on, and if I would press Ctrl down now, I could actually move on to the next segment. However, this is definitely not a terminology I want to ignore. This is a geographical name occurring in the game, and the translation should always be consistent. So I need to correct this problem first before moving on to the next segment. Now, the thing is that whenever I move to another window, it tries to look up the translation again, which takes a lot of time as this is such a long segment. So that's something I just have to deal with. Normally, I would not just toggle ignore all the time, of course. So what you can see is once it has found the segment, now you can actually see that the quality assurance is really live. Let me correct the issue. And as you see, the orange disappears immediately. So you can see that the live quality assurance is actually pretty fast. I insert a space again, bam, it notices this is wrong. So this is what I mean with live quality assurance. It gives me feedback immediately. I'm satisfied about the current translation of this segment. I will proofread it twice after this anyway. This is just a draft translation I'm showing you in this video. And I will move on to the next segment by pressing Ctrl down, which is now possible because all terms in the target adhere to the client specific terminology. There we go. It takes a few seconds because it does not look up just one segment. It looks up all sentences in this segment separately. And as you can see, we already have a few problems with terminology in the translation given. Well, first, the part of this, the match we now see is patched. Part of it is patched. It has found you want some literature for a small fee. I mean, to be precise, I can look this up using Concordance. It has found these in the previous segment, actually, that ended with these two sentences. You want some literature for a small fee. I mean, now, normally, a normal cat tool would never be able to find this. It would scan the memory for just this whole segment and then present you with a match like this, which is just 45%. And as you can see, you want some literature for a small fee, I mean, despite the fact that I actually have translated these two sentences already before, they do not show up in the match given, generated by the translation memory. So this is a feature I found really lacking in existing cat tools. And so I have programmed Doraemon in such a way that it dives way deeper than that. It does look up the whole segment, but then it also looks up all the sub-segments, all the sentences, one by one separately in the memory. And it came up with something that you'd never be able to find in other cat tools. So you want some literature for a small fee, I mean. This has been patched from existing translations. And indeed, wil je wat literatuur voor een klein bedrag bedoel ik. That's exactly what I need. Okay, so I'm satisfied about the current translation of this segment. I'm just gonna put my cursor here. And so that I can move on to the next segment. Let's do that. You recognize the colors of a member of the Rise boldly out and about on the main roads. You're a grifter, stranger, under contract maybe. It's a full MMT, it says here. That means it's just this is the result. This is a suggestion from the neural network. It's partly patched, but the only part that was actually patched was probably just this tag 0, which apparently also occurs as a separate loose segment in the translation memory. So that doesn't really help us here. So basically we can consider this as a full neural suggestion. En parts of it are usable and parts of it are not. You recognize the colors of a member of the Rise. Je herkent de kleuren van een lid van de opstand. Yeah, as you can see, Rise, even in the story, should always be translated as verrijzing because it's the name of a movement occurring in the story of this game. So this needs to be changed into verrijzing. Now, normally I would just press Ctrl-1 to copy this term to the target segment I'm working on. But the thing is that the video recording software I'm currently using to record the very video you're currently watching, uses exactly the same shortcut for other stuff. So I can't use that shortcut in this case. So let me just type this. Je herkent de kleuren van de lid van de verrijzing boldly out and about on the main roads, I would say. Maar open en bloot. Op de hoofdwegen. Op de hoofdweg, I think that's best. Yeah. Open en bloot op de hoofdweg. You a grifter, stranger. Ben je een grifter, vreemdeling? That sounds good. On a contract, maybe. Misschien... What shall we do with that, really? Misschien gecontracteerd. Misschien heb je een contract. Yeah, that sounds good. Ben je een giftenvreemdeling? Misschien heb je een contract. Because contracts, in this game are basically used to keep the working population under control. They're forced to loan money. Of course, they can't pay back the money, and instead they have to work for the rest of their entire lives to pay off their debts. And that in this game is called a contract, but it's not a very fair contract. So that's the context of the word contract in this game. Ben je een giftenvreemdeling? Misschien sta je onder contract. Actually, in this particular case, I like this translation. In this normally I would not use this, but in the context of this particular game, this translation works because contract is not a good thing in this game by default. It's very bad. So, misschien sta je onder contract. I like that in Dutch. It sounds as like you're having some kind of issue. So, let's just control down that. And there we go. These are exact matches. And as you may notice, it takes some time to auto-propagate these matches. Normally, actually, in normal cat tools, this goes a lot quicker. But it takes time in this case because I've specifically chosen to re-verify all terminology in all exact matches that are being automatically propagated. And for that to work, that's actually pretty complicated. Looking up terms for each segment is more complicated than you think. Currently, the maximum length of a term is 7 words. So let's just take this sentence as an example. Potentially, hopefully, this answers any questions you might. This is 7 words in a row, and potentially, this could be a term. So Doraemon looks up this series of 7 words in the terminology database, which is a separate database here. It currently contains about 7,000 words, and tries to find a match. And if it doesn't do that, it will move on to the next part of the sentence. So it will shift 1 word, and then it tries, this answers any questions you might have. And it won't find a match for that either. So then it tries shorter terms of 6 words long, and you get, hopefully this answers any questions you. And if it doesn't find a match for that, it goes on to this answers any questions you might. And then it moves on to answers any questions you might have. Okay, we've arrived at the end of the sentence. Now we start looking up 5-word terms. So we get, hopefully this answers any questions. This answers any questions you, etc., etc. for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1-word terms. And then it starts analyzing everything it has found, tries to filter out short terms occurring within longer terms, prioritizing longer terms, and then it comes up with the actual terms found in the source segment, including the target translations that should be used for these terms. As you can imagine, especially for longer segments, this takes quite some time. For one segment, you often need like dozens of lookups in the database, so that's why it takes time. Actually, it takes time in any cat tool you use. If you open up Trados or a MemoQ, it often takes a few seconds before the tool has actually found all terms occurring in the sentence. And this is because looking up terms is way more complicated than you think. That's just the way it is. And no tool is going to help you with that. So there are basically 2 ways to auto-propagate your translations. Just ignore terminology and just find whatever just take whatever it finds in your memory. That's one way. But I want to re-verify the terminology occurring in all exact matches, just to be very sure that the exact match still adheres to the current terminology, because it often happens that you make a translation, you add it to your translation memory, then new terms are added or changed, and then a few months later, the exact match that was added to your memory and is still there is no longer correct because terminology occurring in that match has meanwhile changed. So this is why I think that re-verifying terminology is important. And so that's a very conscious choice I made. And yeah, that explains why even auto-propagating exact matches takes some time in this tool. If I would turn off this live quality insurance, if I would turn it off, then they would auto-propagate really fast. Good. That being said, we get a new match with... we get a new segment consisting of multiple sentences, and the matches that found for the whole segment is not that interesting. So basically everything you see here, nothing is purple, so everything you see here is a neural suggestion from a neural network behind me. It does say patched, but it probably only applies to the separate tags you find in this target segment. So that's not that interesting. I'll just translate the segment and move on to the next segment, which will hopefully be a bit more interesting for this video. So, as said, I wasn't really satisfied about parts of the interface. There was these parts showing up between the target segment I was working on with which showed which parts of the segment had been patched, showing up in big purple letters. And also I wasn't satisfied about the way the corrections were displayed in big orange letters, and there was also no way to see if I edited segments what exactly were the changes I'd made. So I promised, I already told you in the first part of the video, I was planning to change that, and I've actually done that. I had some extra time left today, so I just took 1.5 hours to change some parts of the code. I've changed this part in the Ajax JS JavaScript part of the code, and I've also made a new PHP file, Ajax show differences.php, that uses an existing library to show the differences between original segments and current segments. So the result, I think, looks a lot better. There's a lot less clutter in the interface now, and this really shows, that this tool is still in development. I'm adding and removing features on the fly. So, let's just show you what's going on here. Now I've got my own business to take care of. Oh well, your loss pops. There you go. This has been patched, and it now shows up in a nice small font, resulting in less clutter. And the patch part is now white on a purple background. I think this looks it's a lot easier on the eye, and it takes up less space on your screen. So this part of the match has been translated by the neural network. Oh well, that has been pulled. Let's use Concordance to find out where it was pulled from. Here, this is an existing string in the translation memory. It's double actually, so apparently it has been translated twice. The course, it's a repetition. A pity they're expensive to replace. Oh well, good job, I guess. So oh well is the third sentence in the source segment, which means that the translation of it is probably the third sentence in the target segments, that 1, 2, 3, and that is now, yeah, and that part has been inserted here with a white font in the patch match. So this part is basically correct already, if it's not too context sensitive, and the rest has been pulled from a neural network. Now let's see what happens when I start actually editing the match. No, I've got my own business to take care of. Nee, ik moet voor mijn eigen bedrijf zorgen. This says basically that I've got my own company to take care of. That's not what we want. Ik moet voor mijn eigen... I'm gonna translate this really freely. I'm gonna translate it as I have enough problems myself as it is. I'm not sure whether I should actually do that. But, you can see that while I'm editing this sentence, you can see that this part of the translation has been changed into this. And this is a lot more consistent with the differences display of the exact or fuzzy match found for the entire segment displayed on top of the interface. So I think on the whole, this is a lot more consistent. Takes up less space, there's less clutter, and it's even more eye candy. So while I edit this sentence, I'll just stop the recording because it's not very interesting to see me thinking about possible translations, and we'll continue very soon. Hold up. Okay, so I think I know what how I'm going to translate this segment. No, I've got my own business to take care of. I'm going for this after all. Nee, ik heb al genoeg aan mijn hoofd. That fits the context, I guess, in this case. Nou ja, in this case, this doesn't really work. This is a pretty context-sensitive sentence, so let's change that into okay. Okay, your loss, pops. I'm not sure how to translate pops. Let's do a concordance. Ouwe. Okay. Ouwe. Old guy, old man. Okay, that sounds good. That sounds good. Jouw probleem, your problem. Let's change it into that. Jouw probleem. Jouw probleem. Ouwe. And as you can see, the changes are displayed here on the fly, so I can immediately see which parts have stayed the same and which part in the target segment have changed. Cell stalks off in pursuit of her target. Stalks off. How shall we translate that? Let's see. Have I translated this before? Stalks off. Yes, I've done that before. Sluipt de schaduw in. Okay, so sluipt weg. That's probably going to work. This is a spelling check. There's a spelling check. That's basically the browser's built-in spelling check. And I'm just adding these words because these are spelled correctly. Cel sluipt weg op zoek naar his or her doelwit. Nee, ik heb al genoeg aan mijn hoofd. Oké, jouw probleem, ouwe, sluipt weg op zoek naar een doelwit. Oké, that sounds good. And we go to the next match. So now just to illustrate how generally the whole system saves me a lot of time, let's take this segment. A fellow grifter approaches you. Hey buddy, you got a minute? I'm on a job right now. I've tracked my target all the way here from Murder Bay. I can take them down on my own, but it's always better to minimize, okay, risk, right? Okay, well, there we go. There are some issues with terms, it says, but not anymore. It's constantly being updated, constantly searching, and after a while, you know, things even out and it has made its final decision. Part is patched, that's will you niet meedoen, that's you want in, and that was taken from don't you want in, so that's a pretty similar sentence. Let's just translate it. This is pretty straight, so I don't need time to think. So let's go. A fellow grifter approaches you. Een andere grifter nadert je. Let's change that into een andere grifter komt naar je toe. And we can now see live the changes I have made. Hey vriend, heb je even? This is perfect. This is a perfect neural suggestion. Yeah, so the neural network really kicks in here. I'm on a job right now. Ik ben nu aan het werk. That's okay. It's perfect. I've tracked my target all the way here from Murder Bay. So ik heb mijn doelwit helemaal gevolgd vanuit Moordbij. This is perfect. And the terminology Moordbij, Murder Bay is correct too. I can take them. This is the gender neutral. This is a gender-neutral personal pronoun. We don't have that in Dutch. We'd have to make a choice for his or her. There are all kinds of tags I can use for that, but I prefer to just work around the issue. I'm just gonna just gonna repeat the word target here. So Ik kan het doelwit alleen uitschakelen, but it's always better to minimize risk, right? Het is altijd beter om risico's te minimaliseren. Niet waar? Sounds better. You want in? Wil je meedoen? Because we don't need the don't part of this suggestion. We can split the bounty 50-50. We kunnen de premie 50-50 splitsen. What shall we do? What shall we do? I think we can just translate this pretty literally. Split bounty. Maybe we have done similar sentences before. No, we have not, it seems. No. Or maybe just evenredig, but that's a bit formal, I think. We kunnen 50-50. Maybe that's a good one. Let's just check the dictionary. I think in this particular case, that's how we say it in Dutch. We kunnen de premie door tweeën delen. Maybe that sounds good. We kunnen de premie door tweeën delen. Jouw aandeel zou dan amount zijn. Een andere gifte komt naar je toe. Hey vriend, heb je even. Ik ben nu aan het werk. Ik heb mijn doelwit helemaal gevolgd vanuit moordbaai. Ik kan het doelwit alleen uitschakelen, maar het is altijd beter om risico's te minimaliseren, nietwaar? Wil je meedoen? We kunnen de premie door 2 delen. Jouw aandeel zou dan... This sounds perfect. Okay. And you see the amount of changes I've made is I have not made that many changes really. So you can really see the neural network kicking in here. And it refuses to go to the next segment because of numbers. There's a number issue. So that's mostly related to tags 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. The one in money. Of course, the 50-50 has disappeared because I've decided to translate this as we can just split the bounty in. Basically, in Dutch, it says in twos, into half. So in this particular case, I'm going to very consciously ignore the warning. And now I can do control down and go down to the next. So agree to the deal. This is not a match. I do get a fuzzy match from the memory. Ga akkoord met het plan. And this is actually pretty close. It's 82%. So let's just control up that one. And here you immediately see the edits I made. This was the machine translation. This is the suggestion, the fuzzy match from the memory. And we just need to change het plan into the deal. Ga akkoord met the deal. And we have the translation of agree to the deal. Control down. Weiger, refuse. This is auto-propagated because it's an exact match from the memory and it passes the terminology checks I discussed before. Sorry, I'm previously engaged. Sorry, ik ben eerder betrokken. This is really idiomatic. So ik heb al andere afspraken. I already have other deals, other appointments in Dutch. Sorry, ik heb al andere afspraken. Control down. Watch yourself out there. Now you see something new. This is pink that pops up here. This is really a bad example, so I'm not going to explain this one. I hope this will pop up later in another segment so that I can explain more about this. One of the coolest features in Doraemon. But yeah, this is not a good example. So we're just going to control up this one because the translation stays the same. Wees voorzichtig and we control down that one. Deal, you redfink, I'll drop you both. Okay, verrader, you redfink. This is patched, this part is patched. I'll drop you both. Ik laat jullie allebei vallen. This is fishy, this is really fishy. What does drop you both mean? And I'd like to introduce another tool I'll use for my translation. It's called DT Search. This is not something I developed myself. It is pretty expensive. It's also used for forensic research and basically it enables you to look through multiple files at once, which is really great as most clients provide you with dozens of reference files, dozens of Q&A files. And I just want to be able to look through all of them at once, no matter the format of said file. So I want to look up the string drop. You already inserted this and I press search. And there it comes, and it appears this question has already been asked. You redfink, I'll drop you both. The Spanish translator asked, could you explain how they are being dropped? Context, please. Who does both refer to? And then the client answers, drop you means kill you in this context. Okay, so that is something that really helped me. So if it means kill you, then I'm going to translate this. I'm going to kill you both. Ik vermoord jullie allebei. There we go. And we control down this, and we're not allowed to do this because it says deal should be translated as geef, but this only applies to the previously mentioned mechanical part of the file. So I'm going to consciously ignore this from now on. There, that is a button press, that's nice. And you see that now I can safely control down this translation. Another thing I need to explain is the numbers you see here. In the first part of this video, they were not displaying correctly. I had to make some changes in the code. Once more, this tool is in constant development. But as you can see, it shows today's turnover based on the number of words I've translated today, multiplied by the rate for said client. and multiple clients can get multiple rates, different rates, and this number keeps track and takes into account all of that. File word count is the total word count, the total number of words translated in this particular file. Today's word count is the number of words I've translated for this client, this particular client today. And behind that, you see the number of milliseconds it took to process a certain string. So, for example, if we reprocess this sentence, it now says 1985 milliseconds, which is slightly less than 2 seconds, which is, I guess, a normal, an average translation speed, considering the fact that it just does not just do a lookup of the whole segment, but of all separate sentences in said segment. Okay, so I finally found an interesting string that shows another feature of Doraemon. Here we have ask about the target, and the neural network says vragen over het doelwit. It fails to see this is an actual imperative. This is impossible to see without context, really, so I don't really blame the neural network for that. But what you see here is a pink line, and basically what happens, this is a so-called, what I call a fuzzy patched match. So it has found a fuzzy match from the translation memory, namely the string ask about the market, which has been translated as vraag naar de markt. And it has discovered that in this new source segment, only one word is different, namely market has been changed into target. Now, and the software then checks, as soon as it detects situations like these, it starts scanning the terminology database, and it also starts scanning all source segments in the translation memory that consist of just this term. So market or target. And this way it tries to find possible defined terminology for the words market and target. So now it apparently has found the translation for market somewhere. It's not listed here, so it may, for example, have found it somewhere in the translation memory database. I can check that. I can just input see if there's a source string called market, and actually there is. There's a source string market which was translated as markt for a client called Fancy Bytes, another great client of mine, and that was for the game Mad Games Tycoon on 4 August 2019. So it knows that market is markt. It has found this. And for target, well, that is pulled straight from the terminology database, so it knows that target is doelwit. So what it now knows is that it should search the Dutch translation of market and replace it with the Dutch translation of target. And this is where the magic happens. It changes vraag naar de markt. The match it has, the fuzzy match it has found in the translation memory into vraag naar de doelwit. This is still wrong because doelwit in Dutch has another gender. It has a different gender than markt. But now I only need to change the into het, and voila, I'm done. Vraag naar het doelwit. This is the correct translation. You can maybe imagine that this feature is especially, it really comes in handy when you're translating robotic text. Actually, when I was doing the mechanical part of this file, this feature was really useful. But you can also think of, IT manuals, maybe even legal stuff. Well, everything that's pretty formal and robotic really benefits from this feature, which I have not found in any translation software on the market. The beautiful thing is, it does not only do this for series of one words, it will also do this for terms consisting of 2 words, 3 words, or even 4 words. So if it, for example, says ask about the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4, or maybe the word order is different, and it says 1 asks about 2 or something like that, then it will try to search and replace all the terms 1, 2, 3, 4 found in said source segment, and that's real magic. What's happening there? It's also possible to define new patterns of terms appearing in sentences depending on the situation, but this is still something that needs to be coded manually. Vraag naar het doelwit, vraag naar agent comes straight from the memory. Ask about Murder Bay. Well, here's another one that's very similar, but yeah, in this case, no magic is happening because it has no terminology found for the Barrens as one term, or Murder Bay as one term that it has found, but the Barrens is obviously not defined as a term. I could, this is just for illustrative purposes, let me define the Barrens as de Baronnen, just, you know, to show you how this works. So that has now been added. And let's now retranslate the sentence, and voila, this is where the magic happens, because I can actually show you what's happening if I turn on, this is called patch debug, I think. See, you now get extra debug information, and it has now found the Barrens is de Baronnen. This is what I just added. And it won't appear here in the terminology list because, of course, it's not a term found in the source sentence. And it has found for Murder Bay, that is Moordbij. That is pulled straight from the terminology database because that is actually the string found in a source sentence, a source segment. So now it knows that it can translate as vraag naar de bronnen as vraag naar Moordbij. So it knows how to replace the Barrens, the translation of the Barrens with the translation of Murder Bay. So yeah, now all I need to do is press this button and move down. That's all I do really. So that's a really nifty feature. And as I said, this does not only work for one term, it works for, I think, currently up to 6 terms in the same sentence. Okay, so let me take the Barrens out again, because this is not really a term. There we go. Okay. So far, my explanation about Doraemon. There's lots of other stuff to explain. There are many other features, but I think I covered the basics of this software, and what it hopefully shows is that, well, one, your translations are in safe hands. If you outsource them to me. I hope it also shows the enormous possibilities that are there if you not just focus on translation itself, but also all the other stuff that comes with it. I think, especially as a game translator, it's important to be aware of technological advances. As most of the strings you translate as a game translator are pulled directly from code, it goes without saying that code and language are intertwined pretty much, really. So it's good as a translator to be aware of the relation between language and code, to have insights to understand what the code is actually doing. And you can even take it one step further and learn how to code yourself, so that you can build tools like these and completely customize them to your needs. The thing is that, well, every game uses its own code. Every game has its own way to deal with strings, and having your own CAT tool really enables you to cater to that and to fine-tune your tool to the situation at hand. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you have any questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to drop me a line. I may post some more videos about this tool, about new features I add, or maybe things I forgot to mention in this video. Have a good day, translate safely, and game on.